Hey guys, have I got some big news to share with you. Until now, it's been a well-known fact that only teachers from the US, the UK, Ireland, Canada, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand can legally teach English in Korea on an E2 visa, right? Wrong. Last week, my manager and I were checking some of the fine details about E2 visa issuance in the Korean version of the manual. There was a small block of text near the bottom that said non-native English speakers can also teach English in Korea on an E2 visa under specific conditions. Go and check the video description. I'll put the Korean text there. You can see for yourself. This is for real. In the past, we thought that the only way for non-native English speakers to teach English in Korea was to have an F-series visa, such as an F4 for those of Korean descent or an F6 for someone married to a Korean citizen. Because it sounded too good to be true, I called the Korean immigration hotline at 1345 to find out the real story behind this supposed E2 loophole. Here is what they told me. There are indeed 3 other groups of people who can teach English in Korea on an E2 visa, even if they're not native speakers. First of all, people who are married to someone on an E1 through an E7 visa. That includes the spouse of an E2 holder. Second, people married to foreigners who graduated with a master's or a PhD from a Korean university in the science fields. Third, the spouse of someone who has an investor visa in Korea. If you want to get an investor visa, you have to invest more than 500 million won in Korea. That's a bit more than 450,000 US dollars. Good luck. For each of these 3 groups, the non-native English-speaking spouse must have all of the regular documents that any other E2 applicant would provide for the E2 application process. The 2 that typically take the longest to prepare are a national level police check from your home country plus an apostille, and a notarized photocopy of your undergraduate degree certificate, also plus an apostille. In addition, there's a special extra requirement for a non-native speaker to be eligible for this spousal E2 loophole. You have to have a TESOL certificate. The officer I spoke to at the immigration call center didn't have specific details on what type of certificate would or would not be accepted, so I'm going to assume you should follow the EPIC guidelines. That means it has to be at least 100 hours. The number of hours have to be printed somewhere on the certificate, and it has to very specifically say that it's a TESOL or TOEFL certificate. I'm not sure whether the TESOL certificate has to be apostilled as well, but the EPIC program doesn't require that, so hopefully not. Again, the specifics of the TESOL certificate requirement aren't completely clear or publicized yet, so you should expect some differences between your experience and that of other people. A quick extra note about the police check. The immigration officer I talked to was very clear about the issuance date. Even if you've been in Korea for a while and you already have your ARC, you need a police check from your home country that is less than 6 months old at the time you apply for this E2 visa loophole. This might mean you have to go back home and get a new police check, even if the one you got before was less than 6 months old when you originally entered Korea. After you get all these documents together, go and start hunting for a job because you will also need to bring a work contract to be able to complete this visa modification. Last, make an appointment and visit immigration. You or your new boss can call 1345 in advance to make sure you have everything you need for yourself, as well as business documents from the school. If you're currently in Korea on an F3 visa, that's a spousal dependent visa, you have 2 options. You can choose between converting your F3 into an E2, or you can keep your E3 and apply for permission for activities not covered by the status of sojourn. If you do choose to convert to an E2, you'll need to provide a new photo that's different from the one on your current visa, and the fee will be 130,000 won. One last note. Remember that this loophole depends partly on proving you meet the requirements, but also depends on having a job. It might sound easy since you're a qualified teacher, but I wouldn't be so sure. Here are 2 reasons why. First, this policy was established 2 years ago in July of 2017, and we're only just finding out about it now in July of 2019. So it's likely that schools don't know either and might not consider your application as a result if they see that you're not a native English speaker. My best advice is not to list your nationality on your resume and address that later once they've had the chance to get to know you. If you want to go in the opposite direction, you could include a note on your resume about being eligible to do E2 work under the new regulations and reference the exact Korean text from the immigration manual. In this case, I'd also suggest including your scores from at least one internationally recognized, standardized, comprehensive English test, such as IELTS or TOEFL. The second reason that getting your E2 through this loophole could be problematic is that even if you educate the school about the new E2 regulations, and even if they're willing to consider your candidacy, they still might not offer you a job. There's a lot of pressure from parents to have their students study with native speakers. Even though Korean labor law prohibits discrimination based on nationality, when running this kind of business, many bosses will sadly just give the parents what they want. That doesn't mean you should give up, though. Someone has to be the first at anything new. Change takes time, so make sure your application is impeccable to give yourself the best chance possible. Through the end of 2019, I'll be happy to offer my services for free to anyone exploring this loophole. This includes looking over your resume and other application documents, consulting about E2 visa regulations or paperwork, and offering mock interviews to help you make a great impression. All right, that's it. Comment below if you have a request for a future video topic, any questions, or especially if you managed to get an E2 through this visa loophole. Share and subscribe to Korea E2 Helper to stay up to date on all the latest content, including application and interview tips.